Chapter 31. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After all, she appeared next to Elizabeth in a flash. Where do we start? There are too many books here. Let the librarian here help you find it. He knows where every book is placed. Joanna said. Otherwise, it's daytime now, and the administrator is probably taking a break. Let's look for it ourselves. Elizabeth hesitated for a moment, and then said. Joanna curled her lips and said disdainfully, the servants are just for bossing around. Are you stupid because of reading? You are the princess, Elizabeth. Wait here, I will call him. Just then, footsteps came from the stairs, a slender figure walked down from the second floor, and then a polite voice sounded. Your Highness, are you looking for a book? What type of romance novel do you want to read? An extremely familiar voice reached my ears. Elizabeth stiffened, and then a look of surprise appeared on her beautiful face. It's you. Even if she could forget her identity as a princess, she would never forget the voice that narrated Romeo and Juliet. Elizabeth looked suddenly, and sure enough, a handsome face came into view. Even Joanna was surprised to see Fang Qingyan here. The last time she came to pick up the books, she just waited outside the door and ordered her servants to come in. So he was the new administrator that Bard's old butler mentioned before. Fang Qingyan had an infectious smile on his face, looked at Elizabeth calmly, and said politely, long time no see, Your Highness, you are as beautiful as ever. While speaking, he had already used his mental power to scan Elizabeth's body. Sure enough, she had the key with her. It was a very ordinary, rusty bronze key. It was ugly. It is impossible for any noble lady to use it as an ornament, but Elizabeth used it as a necklace, wore it on her slender and white neck like a gooseneck, and kept it close to her. This shows that she is a very emotional person. Fang Qingyan's eyes flashed slightly, but his smile remained the same. I was actually making some calculations in my mind. Now that Elizabeth is very close to him, he can snatch the key away at any time, or use the superpower of mind control to make her hand over the key like a puppet. But Fang Qingyan didn't plan to do that, because Elizabeth was Castain's daughter. Why are you here? Elizabeth's face was filled with unprecedented happiness, and she quickly walked to Fang Qingyan and asked. Fang Qingyan repeated what he had said to old butler Bard before. Ah. Has that old man passed away? Elizabeth's eyes showed a hint of sadness. The last time she saw Castain, she felt that the old earl was in very bad health, and she didn't expect that he had really passed away. Fang Qingyan blinked. What kind of grandpa? That's your dad, his biological dad. However, he did not intend to talk too much about Castain. The past was in the past, the dead were gone, and the living were stronger. Ahem, Your Highness the princess must be looking for a book, right? Fang Qingyan said, reaching for the wooden ladder for climbing the bookshelf, and asked with a smile, what book do you want to read? I want to read a book that touches people's hearts just like Romeo and Juliet. Elizabeth's eyes glowed with dazzling light, and she couldn't help but clenched her pink fists. Is there any in the library? Romeo and Juliet. Fang Qingyan paused, gently put down the wooden ladder, and returned it to its original position. Then he shook his head. Then I really don't have one here. Elizabeth's little face suddenly became stunned, and her excitement was swept away. Joanna next to her snorted proudly. She said yes or no, but if you still don't believe it, you have to come here in person. Are you giving up now? Suddenly, Elizabeth remembered something, became energetic again, and raised her head. Her aqua-blue eyes looked at Fang Qingyan expectantly. You don't have one here, then, do you have one? She put all her hopes on Fang Qingyan. Just because you can't find a good book doesn't mean you can't hear a good story. Facing her beautiful and nervous gaze, Fang Qingyan showed an infectious smile. Yes. Really? Elizabeth was so excited that she wanted to jump 3 meters high and rush to Fang Qingyan. You didn't lie to me. It's true. Fang Qingyan nodded firmly and asked her, Princess, do you want to hear it? Think. Elizabeth nodded without hesitation. Even the maid Joanna showed expectant eyes. However, Fang Qingyan shook his head. I can tell you a story, but I have 2 small requirements. How dare a little servant make demands of Her Royal Highness? If it were anyone else, I'm afraid he would have ordered someone to drag Fang Qingyan out to feed the dogs, but Elizabeth did not hesitate at all. She nodded repeatedly like a chicken pecking at rice. Of course, I haven't paid you back the dance I owed you last time. Just tell me what you want. A wonderful story is priceless. Yes, you can give me whatever you want in return. Fang Qingyan turned to look at Joanna beside him and said with a smile, the first condition is that the story can only be told to one person. Elizabeth was stunned. Immediately, she turned back sharply and abandoned Joanna ruthlessly. Ahem, then, just go out and wait. Joanna's eyes widened and she looked frustrated. She wanted to hear it too, but there was a difference between master and servant, so she had no choice but to give way to Elizabeth. Joanna still had to keep the princess safe, so she didn't go far and stood by the door. Speak quickly, tell me quickly, what's the second condition? Elizabeth asked excitedly. Fang Qingyan squinted his eyes and slowly moved his gaze down from her face, stopping on her sizable chest. The second condition is that I want you, your highness princess. Elizabeth was so frightened that she hugged herself, shrank back, and shook her head like a rattle. This won't work. Ahem, I haven't finished speaking yet, don't be nervous. Fang Qingyan knew there was a misunderstanding, so he could only blurt out, I want something from you to commemorate the encounter with Her Royal Highness the Princess. Call. Elizabeth breathed a sigh of relief. If you just want something personal, that's not a problem. She nodded and looked at Fang Qingyan with clear eyes. What do you want? Let me think about it. What do you want? Fang Qingyan rubbed his chin with his slender fingers, pretending to think, and looked Elizabeth up and down, then smiled and said, the necklace on Her Majesty's neck is very beautiful. I want this. If you are willing to take it off and give it to me, I will give it to you. Tell 10 stories, I guarantee you will like each one. Although with some coaxing elements, but it's actually a fair deal. By obtaining the key in this way, Fang Qingyan was worthy of his own conscience and worthy of the old Count Castain. P.S. The fourth update, please support me, Chapter 42. You want my necklace? Elizabeth was stunned for a moment, then frowned, shook her head and said, This won't work either. This necklace is the only relic left by my mother to me. It's not beautiful either. If you don't believe me, I'll show it to you. She gently took off the lock on the necklace with her bare hands, took it out, and showed it to Fang Qingyan. This bronze key is indeed too ordinary. If used as a decoration, it would look ugly. Even if it is thrown on the ground, no one will bend down to pick it up. It's not beautiful. Elizabeth hesitated and hesitated. Moreover, it is not just a relic of my mother to me, there is also a very important reason. Her little hands held the key tightly, as if it were more valuable than life, more than just a relic from my mother. Is there a more important meaning? Her words aroused Fang Qingyan's strong curiosity, and he asked, what is the reason? Is it convenient for your highness to tell me? Reason? Elizabeth seemed to have thought of something, and suddenly, her pretty face turned red, so red that she was about to smoke. She quickly shook her head, hurriedly avoiding Fang Qingyan's aggressive gaze, and stammered, can't say, it is, my secret. It seemed like this question made her extremely shy. This made Fang Qingyan burning with the desire to reveal the secret. He narrowed his narrow eyes, took a step forward, and said in a seductive voice, Your Highness, let's do this. I don't want your key anymore. As long as you tell me the secret, I will. How about I tell you a story? His voice sounded like the devil's temptation, ringing near her tiny, crystal-clear ears. Fang Qingyan was determined to figure out what was more important to Elizabeth than a fascinating love story. Gudong. Elizabeth's throat rolled hard, and a tangled and hesitant look appeared on her delicate and beautiful face, but in the end she shook her head and said shyly, this secret really can't be told. I'm embarrassed to say it, but you will definitely. You're laughing at me, I won't tell you. Deceive failed. Fang Qingyan narrowed his eyes slightly. If you don't tell me, can't I know? I want to know. Your Highness the Princess. He suddenly spoke. Elizabeth subconsciously looked up at him, and immediately met a pair of eyes that were deeper than the abyss, glowing with a faint purple light. Fang Qingyan's eyes were beautiful, but they were like bottomless black holes, seeming to swallow up everything in Elizabeth, including the soul. Elizabeth's beautiful eyes became blank, and Fang Qingyan has entered her inner world, the deepest part. 16 years ago, when Elizabeth was 4 years old, her mother Camilla fell into depression because she missed Count Castain, and finally walked into the scorching sun and disappeared into ashes. At that time, Elizabeth was just a little girl who didn't understand anything. She doesn't understand why her mother is sad. Why despair? Why commit suicide? Father, why doesn't Mom want me anymore? That she asked Marquis Morpheus this question for the first time, but her father did not answer her. He remained silent and looked terrible. Elizabeth was unwilling to get the answer and asked every day, every month, and every year. She wanted to know why her mother didn't want her anymore. Until one day 2 years later, when Elizabeth asked her father this question again, Marquis Morpheus finally answered her. Marquis Morpheus's answer was only 4 words: because of love. Chapter 32. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Love? Elizabeth looked confused, because this once again involves her knowledge blind spot, so 6-year-old Elizabeth embarked on a new journey. Her biggest goal at the time was to figure out one question: what is love? She asked many people and got many answers, but she still wondered, isn't love beautiful? Why does it bring so much pain, tragedy, and despair to my mother? With such questions, Elizabeth opened the first love novel in her life, Romantic Castle. From then on it was out of control, starting from the age of 6, to the age of 7 or 8, when she was 10 years old, she finally began to understand what love was. She finally understood her mother's choice. The mother does not love the father and falls in love with another man. My father loves my mother very much and does not allow my mother to find a hot man. The mother was so sad that she committed suicide. Elizabeth, like her mother, values love more than life, soul, and dignity, but she didn't want to be like her mother, who spent her whole life searching for love to no avail and ended in tragedy. So when Elizabeth was 12 years old, she made an amazing decision. A relic left by her mother, she will always wear it. In the future, if you fall in love with a man wholeheartedly, you will give him the key as a proof of your lifelong love. No wonder he is so shy and embarrassed to say it. It turns out that this key is a love token that she plans to give to her future lover. There is a lot of information obtained, which spans 6 years of Elizabeth's life from the age of 6 to 12. But in fact, it only took Fang Qingyan a tenth of a second to read all the information. He had already turned off his mind-reading ability. Even Joanna, who was not far away, didn't notice anything unusual. Did I just get distracted? Elizabeth was a little confused, but immediately she shook her head and put away the distracting thoughts. Her beautiful face was full of sincerity, and her beautiful eyes were apologetic. I'm really sorry. Although I really want to hear your story, it's not convenient for me to tell you the secret of this key. It's okay, Your Highness Princess. Fang Qingyan shook his head, showed a gentle smile, looked at her softly, and said softly, actually, I was just joking. I am happy to share the stories I know with you without asking you to make any return. Really? Elizabeth looked surprised. Fang Qingyan smiled and nodded, really. In fact, Fang Qingyan always felt that Elizabeth's book-loving character was a bit abnormal and weird. Even if most people like reading books, they won't be as obsessed with them as she is, so obsessed that they would give up the whole world for books. But when he learned about Elizabeth's past, he completely understood. In fact, the princess has not gotten over the shadow of her mother's suicide until now. She wants to study everything about love. Fang Qingyan was full of sympathy for this girl. Even the look in her eyes softened a lot. He had no thought of harming Elizabeth, and even felt that if this angelic girl was in any trouble, he would be willing to help. Using mind reading on Elizabeth just now is not something a gentleman would do. Since she wanted to hear the story, Fang Qingyan decided to satisfy her as a way to make up for his rude behavior just now. As for the key, if she doesn't want to give it, forget it, don't force it. To be honest, Fang Qingyan really looked down upon a mere prince's tomb. With the system in place, he will become a prince sooner or later. Your Highness, let me tell you a story about mermaids. Fang Qingyan showed an infectious smile. P.S. The 5th update is here. Please support me. Chapter 43. Mermaid Story. This is the first time Elizabeth has heard of the term mermaid. Suddenly his eyes sparkled with curiosity. she did not take the liberty to interrupt. She sat on the chair, holding her white chin in her little hand, and continued to listen carefully. The mermaid princess saved the prince and fell in love with him at first sight. Suddenly she heard the sound of someone approaching, so she hurriedly hid. When the prince woke up, he mistakenly thought that a human girl had saved him, so he fell in love with that girl and decided to marry her as your wife. Fang Qingyan's voice was unhurried and slow as he slowly told one of the most classic love stories in Andersen's fairy tales, the story of the mermaid princess. Elizabeth listened very seriously, and she was completely immersed in it. Just like last time, the story captivated her from the very beginning. The mermaid princess made a deal with the witch. In order to have human legs, she gave her singing voice to the witch. At the same time, she also paid a huge price, that is, every step she takes, her feet will suffering excruciating pain. Elizabeth's big aqua-blue eyes showed admiration and yearning. Is this love? For the sake of the one he loves, he is willing to give up the singing voice that he was once proud of, and is even willing to endure great pain, just to get closer to him. The story continues. Although the mermaid princess can't sing or talk, she dances very well and successfully pleases the prince. However, the prince doesn't know that every dance step, turn, jump, she endures in human pain, but still tries to keep smiling in front of the prince. Elizabeth pursed her lips tightly, and tears gradually flashed in her eyes. She didn't dare to listen any more. She was afraid that the mermaid princess would pay so much, but in the end she couldn't get the love she wanted. Just like her mother, who was eventually destroyed by love. Fang Qingyan glanced at her and saw that she covered her ears with her little hands. He couldn't help but laugh and said, "Princess, if you don't want to listen, I won't talk anymore." Elizabeth's face was tangled for a while, and her eyes hesitated, but in the end she still gritted her teeth. I want to listen, that she has heard of the tragic Romeo and Juliet. Is there a sadder ending to love in the world? She doesn't believe it. Fang Qingyan looked at her with a half-smile, and stretched out his hand to give him a tissue. Then you take this first. Elizabeth sneered immediately, and threw the tissue on the ground with disdain. Don't look down on me, I won't cry. Fang Qingyan nodded and continued to tell the story. One day, the prince brought the mermaid princess to the seaside to meet a girl. The prince said, "She saved my life, so I want to marry her." The mermaid princess shouted loudly, "No. I saved you, not her," but her voice had been given to the witch, and the prince couldn't hear these words at all. Only by killing the prince can she get back her singing and fish tail, but she couldn't do it, and finally dropped the sword and cried and left. At this point, Elizabeth's eyes were actually full of tears, and she was about to cry, but she remembered the bold words she had just put down, so she was stubbornly fighting against her tear glands, forcing herself not to let the tears flow down. Seeing her like this, Fang Qingyan sneered in his heart. Elizabeth was already at the end of her strength. Sure enough, when she heard the tragic ending of the prince married that hypocritical woman, and the mermaid turned into bubbles and died, she could no longer control herself, like the last straw that broke the camel's back. Woo-ah! Elizabeth's mouth pursed, and she suddenly burst into tears. Her beautiful face was covered with tears, and her eyes were red and swollen from crying. Why is it another tragedy? That she was very sad. She felt deeply unworthy for the mermaid princess, but she also sincerely admired her spirit of giving up everything for love. Juliet and Romeo loved each other after all. Even if they died together in the end, they died in the arms of their lovers, but the mermaid princess paid so much, but in the end she never got the prince's love. Even when she died, the prince didn't know that she had loved him. While crying, she fumbled on her body, wanting a tissue to wipe her tears, but she couldn't find it. Finally, she looked at the tissue she had thrown away on the ground, and her body suddenly stiffened, and she felt a burning pain on her face. It was so embarrassing. She had said before that she would not cry, but now she cried. The question was, with Fang Qingyan staring at her, in such an embarrassing situation, should she pick up the tissue or not? Fang Qingyan smiled meaningfully. Pick up the tissue she had thrown away. Sadness struck her heart again. Her Highness the princess did not care about her face. She bent down and picked up the tissue, and wiped her tears. Another cry sounded. It turned out that Joanna, who was outside the door, also cried. This Earl's maid who was more than 1,000 years old actually used her mental power to eavesdrop on people telling stories. You have no martial ethics. Fang Qingyan's evil thoughts surfaced, and he pretended to be angry. You eavesdropped. I didn't, no, Wu. Then why are you crying? I remembered something sad. Fang Qingyan had a strange expression, and subconsciously asked, what sad thing? I saw the princess crying very sadly, and I thought the story must be very exciting, but I couldn't hear it. The more I thought about it, the sadder I became, so I cried. Joanna took a deep breath and said, full emotional intelligence. Fang Qingyan thought her husband had given birth. Chapter 33. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Thank you for your story, it is really wonderful, it shocks the heart and shakes the soul. Elizabeth finally stopped crying, sniffed her nose, and said to Fang Qingyan with a red face, but, can you please stop telling me about tragedies every time, I will cry. Fang Qingyan thought for a while and replied, comedies are often the same, there are only tragedies. Only tragedy can be remembered, right? I know what you're going to say. Elizabeth pouted cutely and learned to answer quickly. Fang Qingyan smiled, she didn't know why, but when she saw him smiling, she suddenly blushed and her heart beat abnormally. He didn't dare to look at Fang Qingyan's face again. I will come to listen to your story tomorrow. Elizabeth stood up, leaning forward slightly with her slim body, thank you. Fang Qingyan shook his head, Her Royal Highness, the princess, has a distinguished status. If she comes to see me, this servant, every day, I am afraid it will make the Marquis unhappy. Come here once a month, and I will tell you a story every month. How about it? In fact, he just didn't want his quiet life to be ruined. If Elizabeth came every day, he would definitely not be able to practice well. A month. Elizabeth frowned her pretty eyebrows, but seeing Fang Qingyan's eyes that couldn't refuse, she had no choice but to nod. Okay, that she is kind-hearted and innocent by nature, and does not want to cause trouble to others, so even if as a princess, she had the right to order Fang Qingyan to tell her stories, she would not do that. From this point alone, it can be seen that Elizabeth's moral cultivation and character are simply 10,000 miles ahead of other royal nobles. Look at Elizabeth, then look at Marston and Jason, they are completely different. Everyone said that Elizabeth was a breath of fresh air in the aristocratic circle, and that was indeed the case. I still owe you a dance, when will I pay you back? Before leaving, Elizabeth suddenly asked Fang Qingyan shyly. Fang Qingyan was stunned for a moment, then laughed and said, do you still remember this? I forgot about it. I am the princess of the Cape clan. I must do what I say and pay off whatever I owe. Elizabeth raised her chin proudly. After saying that, he skipped out of the library, back to the bedroom with Joanna. P.S. The 6th update is here. Xiaopuji asks for your support. Chapter 44. Fang Qingyan stood at the door of the library. It wasn't until Elizabeth's carriage disappeared from sight that he shook his head, turned around and walked inside. He has always been a person who can't afford to do anything early. It would do him little good to get closer to Elizabeth, but it wouldn't do any harm either, just take things as they come. Fang Qingyan returned to the room, the power of qi and blood surged, and his body surface glowed. With a red-gold glow, continue to bathe in the sun and practice the power of the sun. The white horse passes through the gap, time flies, 6 months have passed, the life of a librarian is leisurely, Bristol City is as calm as ever. Elizabeth would come once a month to pick up a love story, and every time she would ask him, have you learned how to dance? But unfortunately, Fang Qingyan's answer was always too stupid to learn. In fact, he didn't learn at all. During this period, several major events occurred in other clans. One of the big news is that the head of the Brooke clan, Marquis Brooke, has given birth to a son again. Yes, after Earl Marston was killed, the Brooke clan fell into the dilemma of having no successor, but Marquis Brooke worked very hard, and after years of sweating, he finally succeeded in creating a human. As soon as the child was born, he was designated as the sole heir of the Brooke clan, and Brooke's Duke ancestor actually climbed out of the coffin and personally named the child, Adam Brooke. The name means son of God's creation. this means that this child will receive careful training from the Duke from an early age and will become a future marquis. The vampire clan has excessive qi and blood, and the higher the level, the more difficult it is to have children, so the birth of Adam Brooke brought hope to the entire clan. Another big news is, the war is about to start again. Yes, the war between the orcs and the vampires has reached the critical point of breaking out again, but this time, it was not Azeroth who took the initiative, but the 7 royal clans of the Kingdom of Nikala, who decided to go out to conquer the orcs. A few years ago, the orcs crossed the Draenor Mountains and captured dozens of cities in the Kingdom of Nikala. All 7 major clans suffered losses. This time, in order to regain the lost territory and drive away the orcs, the Kingdom of Nikala is planning a big operation. There are rumors that the 7 dukes have decided to join forces to take action. The authenticity of this news is not yet clear, but it still caused a national sensation. One stone stirs up 1,000 waves. Because in the past, in the tens of thousands of wars between vampires and orcs, the 7 ancestors of the dukes had never really set foot on the battlefield. Some of them have been in seclusion for thousands of years, and some have been in seclusion for tens of thousands of years. They have long looked down upon the disputes in the world. The only goal in their hearts is to break through the shackles that no duke has broken through for hundreds of thousands of years, the 12-winged blood ancestors, that is the prince. It is precisely because of this that no matter how badly the vampires were defeated or bullied by the orcs in the past, the duke's ancestors were too lazy to take action. Unless the orcs went too far, one can imagine how shocking it was when the news came out that the 7 great dukes of the vampire clan had come out to join forces to defeat the orcs. Most people don't believe this. In addition to the above 2 news, there are only some gossips among the nobles, such as a certain earl cheating on another earl, a certain princess getting pregnant out of wedlock, and other boring news. Fang Qingyan didn't pay too much attention. Crunch. The coffin lid was gently lifted. Fang Qingyan straightened his upper body and took a deep breath. The violent energy of blood gradually subsided and became dormant. Feeling the energy and blood in his body, he shook his head and murmured, "It's still a little bit close. If I want to break through the 6-winged marquis, I still need at least 10 drops of the Duke's essence and blood." In 6 months, he had absorbed more than 30 drops of the Duke's blood essence, but the qi and blood are still far from being saturated and full. There are dozens of marquises in the Nikala kingdom, but only the heads of the 7 major clans can reach the 6 wings. Can you imagine how difficult the journey from 4 wings to 6 wings is? Moreover, even the heads of the 7 major clans relied on the essence and blood of the Duke's ancestors and spent more than 1,000 years before they were able to break through to the 6 wings. Incredible talent and endless resources, both are indispensable. Fang Qingyan's cultivation speed is actually miraculous. Beside the window, Fang Qingyan stood upright, looking at the moonlight in the sky expressionlessly. Pet Shah did not come back for 6 months. Since the last time he gave Pet Shah 3 drops of blood from the general beast, it flew away and has not returned yet. He was a little worried. Wouldn't that guy fail to break through, suffer backlash, and die in a corner of a mountain? Alas! Fang Qingyan sighed quietly. He didn't know much about the advancement of Warcraft. The only way to help Pet Shah was to give it blood and essence, and it had to do the rest by itself. He learned in a certain book that the highest level of night falcons recorded in history was War Beast, and it was almost impossible to advance further. Pet Shah, if you can't keep up with me, then we can only go our separate ways. Give me some courage and come back alive. Fang Qingyan whispered to himself, "Say it." He turned and went downstairs, because his spiritual power had already sensed that Elizabeth came again with her maid Joanna. Chapter 45. Edward, here I come. Elizabeth ran in happily, looking around for Fang Qingyan. It's time for the monthly story meeting again, and whenever this day comes, it's the happiest time for her. Your Highness, what story do you want to hear today? Fang Qingyan smiled with his dark and deep eyes looking at Elizabeth. Seeing him appear, Elizabeth hurriedly ran over dragging her white skirt, staring at Fang Qingyan with her beautiful eyes. "I will listen to whatever story you tell." "Oh. Then I'll just talk about it casually." Fang Qingyan raised his eyebrows at her. His handsome face looked sharp in the candlelight, and his smile was infectious. She nodded, her pretty face flushed slightly, and she subconsciously avoided Fang Qingyan's gaze. How are you lately? Fang Qingyan was stunned for a moment, then chuckled. It's always been good, why do you ask like this? I asked old butler Bard, you haven't left the library since you came here. Elizabeth frowned slightly, with a trace of concern in her aqua eyes, and hesitantly said, I mean yes, if you feel lonely, I can ask the housekeeper to change your job, for example. She suddenly became very shy and rubbed her little hands with nowhere to rest, very nervously. He seemed embarrassed to speak. Like what? Fang Qingyan narrowed his eyes. Elizabeth's beautiful little face looked hesitant for a second, then she gritted her teeth and made up her mind. Her eyes became determined, and she suddenly raised her head, meeting Fang Qingyan's sharp gaze without hesitation. You be my knight. Chapter 34. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Fang Qingyan's eyes widened. Joanna next to her opened her mouth wide. Calm down, princess. Do you know what knight means? There is no doubt that the status of a knight is higher than that of Joanna, the personal maid. Once he becomes Elizabeth's knight, it means that Fang Qingyan has become her most trusted person. In contrast, Fang Qingyan must be absolutely loyal to Her Royal Highness the Princess. And be loyal only to her. The most important thing is that the two will get along day and night from now on, master and slave, inseparable, not a royal knight, but a princess's knight. If it had been anyone else, they would have passed out from excitement. A little servant, a knight who was promoted to the princess, is similar to a little eunuch in the palace who suddenly became the emperor. It's such an exaggeration. Elizabeth's pretty face was so red that she almost bled, but she still looked at Fang Qingyan's face expectantly, waiting for his reply. Fang Qingyan was silent for a few seconds, thinking about a very serious question in his heart. Knight? Who should I ride? Ahem, end the random thoughts. There was an apologetic look on his face and he shook his head politely. I'm sorry to disappoint you, princess. I don't feel lonely. On the contrary, I enjoy being alone. A quiet environment can calm people's minds. Sober-minded and strong-willed. But you are the only one in such a big library, how can you not be alone? Elizabeth was a little anxious and was still trying to work hard. Vampires are social animals. If you become my knight, we can meet and chat every day. Actually, she just wanted to see Fang Qingyan from time to time. Every time she returned to the palace after listening to the story, she would feel empty in her heart. The thought of having to wait another month before they could meet again made it difficult for her to sleep. I just don't know if Elizabeth is simply obsessed with Fang Qingyan's story, or if there is another reason. Maybe I am an exception. I am not suitable for living in groups. I like to be alone. Your Highness, there is no need to say anything more. If you still treat me as a friend, please respect my choice. Fang Qingyan shook his head and firmly refused again. Lions and tigers are always solitary, only foxes and dogs travel in groups. This shows that powerful people are always lonely, because they are powerful enough to cope with all changes and crises alone. This was said by a writer named Hushi. Fang Qingyan deeply agreed. Is it really not possible? You should think about it again. It really doesn't work. Then, okay. Elizabeth's beautiful eyes suddenly dimmed, and her heart was filled with disappointment. Fang Qingyan frowned, wondering if his rejection was too ruthless and made her sad. He hesitated for a moment and showed a soft smile. Your Highness, if you really want to hear stories, it would be better to tell you 2 stories every month. He thought Elizabeth would be happy, but there was no smile on her face. Her beautiful eyes were filled with tears, but she hesitated to speak and finally lowered her head silently. I like you, such a simple sentence, a line that appears in every love novel. She has seen countless girls in books say this sentence to the men they admire, and she has also seen countless men reply to girls that I am the same. But when it was her turn, Elizabeth couldn't speak. He is just a servant of a family. If I suddenly said that, it would probably scare him, right? He will be afraid of my identity as a princess, afraid of my father. Elizabeth's eyes flickered, thoughts swirling in her mind. In a hierarchical society, love between people with unequal status is destined to be painful. Such as Camilla and Castain, after all, Castain was also a dignified count, a nobleman with a fiefdom and a private army, but after falling in love with the royal princess, he still got into trouble. Fang Qingyan's current identity is just a small servant, not as good as Castain. If he really dares to cross the threshold, the consequences will be needless to say, he will be mercilessly strangled. Although Elizabeth is a homebody, she doesn't know everything, she had concerns. Fang Qingyan remained silent and did not speak. He didn't use mind reading to read Elizabeth's thoughts, but he wasn't mentally retarded, so how could he not feel Elizabeth's affection for him? In fact, he had vaguely felt it as early as a month ago, but he was not sure yet. Now he is sure. Okay, I understand. Elizabeth lowered her head, her silver hair covering her head, and the expression on her face could not be seen clearly. I'll come again next time. But the story hasn't been told yet. Fang Qingyan said to her. Elizabeth shook her head. Let's go together next time, Joanna, let's go back. She glanced at Fang Qingyan secretly from the corner of her eye, and then quickly took it back. Fang Qingyan refused to be her knight. Elizabeth felt that she just had unrequited love and that he didn't like her, so she felt very sad, come with full expectations and leave with sadness. Your Highness the Princess. Suddenly there was a voice from behind. Elizabeth paused and her ears perked up. Fang Qingyan said with a smile, the joy of love is mixed with tears, but the pain of love is sweeter than all other joys. I give this to you, I hope you like it. Elizabeth murmured, repeating this sentence in her heart, and suddenly her eyes lit up, and the decadence and depression on her face were swept away, replaced by the vigor of the past. Okay, I remember. She shouted loudly, I will come again. P.S. Xiaopuji is really not good at emotional drama, and the progress is a little fast. In order to make the male and female protagonists have feelings, I racked my brains, and I can only write it like this. With a sentence 6 months later, they fell in love. It should be reasonable, right? Anyway, my girlfriend and I just fell in love with each other and got together naturally. Xiaopuji is not good at writing this kind of love. I hope everyone understands. Chapter 46. Creaky, closed the door gently. Fang Qingyan slowly walked to a bookshelf, sorted out the messy books one by one, and classified them back. After doing all this, he walked to the second floor with a calm expression, intending to continue meditation and practice. Suddenly, Fang Qingyan paused and stopped when he accidentally caught sight of a book on the bookshelf. He walked to the bookshelf, hesitated for a moment, and then reached out and pulled out a thick book from it, Education of Palace Dance. He opened the title page and saw a passage. No one cares whether you dance well or not. Just dance. Great dancers are not great because of their skills, but because of their passion. Able Vlad. Fang Qingyan's mouth twitched slightly, but he still flipped through it. He learned while reading, starting with the simplest dance etiquette. Roar dashed. At a low roar of the beast exploded. A wolf-like monster crawled on the ground, with a huge body, ferocious fangs, and a breath of fire. Are you sure it's here? A sinister voice came from the sky, and then 6 or 7 blood clans were seen slowly descending from the sky and in front of the monster. The young man in the lead was wearing a gorgeous purple robe and a blood-red shawl, with a noble temperament. Roar. The monster nodded repeatedly, indicating that he was sure that he had not found the wrong place. Alger Revno frowned, his eyes showing confusion. It shouldn't be, the breath is cut off here. He looked up, and in front of him was the Capet clan's royal city, Bristol. Yes, more than half a year has passed, and the Revno clan is still investigating the murder of Count Castain. This war beast level abyss wolf is a monster that is very sensitive to smell and can smell hundreds of miles away. Some time ago, Marquis Revno went out to capture it, and after taming it, he used it to track the murderer. The abyss demon wave did not disappoint them. After so much time, it was able to follow the breath left by Fang Qingyan in Jason Castle and tracked all the way to Bristol City, but the breath was cut off here, because Fang Qingyan obtained the 1000 machine mask after entering the city, which concealed his breath. Your Highness, Alger, what should we do next? A guard of the Earl asked. He called him Your Highness, because Alger is Earl Jason's elder brother, another heir of the Reveno clan, and he himself is a zero-wing marquis. After Earl Jason's death, he was the only one left in the Reveno family. If nothing unexpected happens, the position of the head of the family will definitely belong to Alger Ravenno in thousands of years. Obviously, he came to investigate the truth of his brother's murder, although his brother's death made him happy for a while. After all, he became the only heir to the head of the family, but Marquis Ravenno gave him the task of tracking down the murderer. The murderer is hiding in Bristol City. Alger Ravenno sneered. There are only a few marquises of the Capet clan, and only 2 of them are in Bristol City, Marquis Morpheus and his half-brother Marquis Alvis. The murderer can only be one of them, that he was extremely sure of this, because the number of marquises in the entire Nicara can be counted on one's fingers, and there is no unknown marquis, so the murderer is either Marquis Morpheus or his brother Alvis. The Capet clan and our Ravener clan have always kept their distance from each other. I didn't expect them to dare to assassinate Jason. This is an active provocation. Alger showed a cruel grin. The Earl's guard hesitated for a moment and asked respectfully, Your Highness, should we go into the city and investigate again? No. Alger shook his head without thinking and said contemptuously, I am not an idiot like Jason. I will never take risks. He is just too arrogant and high profile, so he is targeted. Only he would do such a stupid thing as risking his life. Smart people always act after they are completely sure. Then let's retreat. Alger's eyes flashed coldly. Go back and discuss with my father and make a good plan. In the blink of an eye, another month has passed. On this day, in a room on the 2nd floor of the library, Fang Qingyan's skin was red, like a roasted sweet potato, emitting flames. Chapter 35. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The expression on his face was very ferocious, like a glaring King Kong, with bulging veins on his forehead and dilated blood vessels on his neck. Drops of sweat as big as beans seeped out from the pores, and were then vaporized by the high temperature. We have reached the most critical and dangerous moment for a breakthrough. Once he fails, like many marquises, he will stay on the 4 wings forever, with no possibility of further advancement. Rumble. The energy and blood in the body turned into the power of the yang, which was extremely vast and violent, like an out-of-control monster, rampaging through the meridians, roaring and wreaking havoc. With a loud bang and a violent impact, some of the indestructible shackles loosened. Suddenly, the red-gold scorching yang power in the body suddenly turned into yin power. The temperature of the space suddenly dropped, and a layer of gleaming white frost condensed on the body surface. Break it for me. Fang Qingyan suddenly let out a ferocious roar like a beast, breaking, 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 breaking. The extremely cold power of qi and blood swept towards the 2 shackles behind him in an unparalleled manner. Boom, 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 boom. After several rounds of violent impacts, with a click sound in his mind, the shackles were torn into pieces. The energy and blood rushed forward, completely penetrating the 2 acupuncture points, and merged together. Laugh. 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 6 huge wings spread across the back, strange and beautiful, noble and evil. Boom. In an instant, the coffin worth 8,000 gold coins exploded. Fang Qingyan, whose upper body was naked, floated up, and the 6 holy wings on his back emitted 2 colors of red gold and blood red light, shining brightly, extremely strong and domineering. Fang Qingyan took a deep breath and couldn't help laughing. 6-winged Marquis. He broke through to the level of 6-winged Marquis and reached the pinnacle of this realm. P.S. Please support, Chapter 47. The 6-winged Marquis's energy, blood and spiritual power, even in normal state, are stronger than those of the 4-winged Marquis with the holy wings. Fang Qingyan felt the power in his body that could destroy the world. He took a deep breath and couldn't hide the shock on his face. After transforming into the 6-winged form, the strength actually climbed to 100 times the normal level. Said without any humility, the 6-winged Marquis bursting out at full strength can hit 10,000 4 wings. And it's the kind of complete crushing and killing. No wonder that for hundreds of thousands of years, the heads of the 7 royal clans of the Blood Clan have been the 6-winged Marquis. Without the Duke being born, the 6-winged Marquis can be said to be invincible. After a while, Fang Qingyan gradually adapted to the sudden increase in strength. the rapid advancement of mental power means a huge improvement in superpowers. The range of Fang Qingyan's space control has reached a terrifying 10 kilometers. As long as he is willing, he can knead and shape the space within 10 kilometers into various shapes like plasticine. He can already fold the space 5 times. Apart from anything else, if we just talk about running away, even if the Duke comes, he won't be able to catch him, provided that he wants to run away. When the energy and blood in his body completely subsided and became dormant, Fang Qingyan returned to the aura of the little baron. Then he looked down at the coffin fragments scattered on the ground. He suddenly fell silent. The breakthrough went quite smoothly. It's just a bit of a waste of coffins. This is my love coffin of 8,000 gold coins. I haven't even taken a girl in there to sleep, and it's just gone. Fang Qingyan's eyes revealed a look of pity. I have no choice but to find another opportunity to get a new coffin. After cleaning up the scattered coffins, he went downstairs. It was a few days later that I saw Elizabeth again. She has regained her former innocence and quirkiness, and her visits to Fang Qingyan have become more and more frequent, coming here every 3 or 5, as usual. What Fang Qingyan told her today was Venus and Adonis. This is an ancient Roman mythology story about the love between Venus, the goddess of love, and the beautiful man Adonis. After the story is finished, Elizabeth sat on the ground with her legs bent, her big aqua-blue eyes filled with tears, her 2 slender white hands resting on the carpet, her body leaning forward, her small mouth shrinking and her nose twitching on her beautiful and delicate face. One twitch, so cute. You finally realized your conscience and told me a tragedy that was not too tragic. She pouted and rolled her eyes at Fang Qingyan with a very lethal look. Although Venus' lover Adonis died, the final ending of the 2 people was not bad. Adonis could go to the earth to be with Venus for half a year every year, but the remaining 6 months had to be spent in heaven. Compared to the tragedies I heard before, this story can be called a happy ending. The main thing is that I have almost finished telling all the tragic love stories I know. Fang Qingyan shrugged helplessly. You come so often, and soon I will have no more stories to tell you. Although he also liked reading books in his previous life, but he couldn't stand Elizabeth spending like this. He had been squeezed dry. He even told her the cowherd and the weaver girl and Liang Shanbua and Zhu Tai. Ah! What should we do? Elizabeth's face was dull. She always thought that Fang Qingyan was an inexhaustible treasure trove of stories. Unexpectedly, he now told himself that the stock is out. How can Fang Qingyan, who has no inventory, satisfy her in the future? What else can be done? Fang Qingyan spread his hands. I have no more stories to tell, and Her Royal Highness has no reason to come here again. How can that be done? Her voice suddenly rose 8 degrees, causing her to stand up from the ground. After calling out, I realized that my reaction was a little misunderstood, so my face turned red. I mean, this princess is not the kind of person who abandons someone after using them. Elizabeth put her little hands on her hips. Her neck was red, but she still said plausibly, even if you can't tell stories, I can still chat with you. We are friends. In fact, she didn't need to hear any more love stories. The story is all about the love between other men and other women. Elizabeth is actually already enjoying her love. Although it was a humble one-sided crush, she was still very happy when she was with Fang Qingyan, even if she didn't do anything or say anything. Well, Her Royal Highness the Princess is really a loyal person. Fang Qingyan narrowed his eyes and looked at her with a half-smile. He didn't know when Elizabeth would be able to muster the courage to confess her love to him. I don't intend to take the initiative to uncover this layer of window paper. Just take your time and wait. Don't be in a hurry. Wait until Elizabeth is ready. At the same time, he is also waiting for him to be ready. Fang Qingyan has been alone for too long, and Fang Qingyan has not yet made up his mind to add another bond to his life. Anyway, this waiting process is quite interesting. Time passed day by day and month by month again. Fang Qingyan enjoys his current peaceful life. Most of the time there was no one to disturb him, allowing him to concentrate on practicing. Elizabeth would occasionally bring Joanna over to him to chat and talk. He fell more and more in love with this lively, innocent little princess. From the 6-winged marquis to the duke, it is another extremely long, bumpy, difficult and long journey. But the marquis's lifespan is more than 10,000 years, so Fang Qingyan has plenty of time. The white horse passes through the gap. In the blink of an eye, 3 years have passed. On this day, the peaceful days were finally broken. The kingdom of Nicala had been brewing for 3 full years, and the 7 major royal clan territories suddenly sounded the horns at the same time that night, kicking off an unprecedented and massive war. The 7 royal families gathered the armies of their respective clans, a total of 2.7 million troops, and marched toward the east. 24 marquises, more than 300 earls, countless viscounts and barons, the whole army attacked. Looking at this battle, the vampires are serious about it this time and want to completely destroy Azeroth. At the same time, there were 4 ancient black coffins accompanying the army, which were pulled by several huge monsters. No one except the 7 masters was allowed to approach. This war is destined to be recorded in the history of the vampire clan. Later generations called this day, the 9-character army's Eastern Expedition. 9 is the ultimate number, and the number 9 is of special significance to the vampires, because several epochs ago, the ancestor of Lilith created 9 princes in Nicala. Although the 9 royal clans have been passed down to this day, only 7 remain, but 9 is still the faith and glory of the vampire clan. Chapter 36. You are listening at novelfull.audio. P.S. Zayapuji asks for support. Chapter 48. This otherworld is huge. There are countless countries and races. The kingdom of Nicala is located in the northwest of the continent, adjacent to the elves to the west, the demons to the south, and Azeroth to the east. The Draenor Mountains are a huge mountain range that is millions of miles long. As the boundary between the 2 countries, there are orcs on this side of the mountain and vampires on the other side of the mountain. The lines have always been clear. The vampires and the orcs had never had any disputes before, and they had always stayed on the same page, but don't know why. One day 1,000 years ago, Azeroth suddenly invaded Nicala. For the first time in hundreds of thousands of years, the orc army crossed the Draenor Mountains, marched straight in, and attacked the city. The hatred between the orcs and the vampires was forged at that time. The 2 countries have been fighting endlessly for 1,000 years. No one can destroy anyone, but now the 9-character army of the vampire clan is marching eastward. It can be said that they are out in full force. It seems that they are tired of playing and intend to fully understand this grudge. The night was as cold as water, and the endless army was like the vast sea, rising and falling on the land. The sound of the march was like an earthquake. Boom, boom, boom. A luxuriously decorated room is hunched over the back of a huge mammoth demon elephant that is more than 10 meters high. Marquis Morpheus's fat body sank into the soft sofa, but his expression was gloomy, as if something was bothering him. "Brother, what are you thinking about?" A voice sounded from behind, and a man with an extraordinary handsome appearance came over holding a red wine glass, his body full of nobility. This is the half-brother of Marquis Morpheus and Elizabeth's uncle, Alves. Like Morpheus, he is an extremely powerful 6-winged marquis. "Oh, I'm fine, Alves." Marquis Morpheus waved his hand, as if he didn't want to talk more. A strange color flashed in Alves's eyes. He smiled, and sat next to him naturally. "I'm your brother. If you have something on your mind, you can tell me. We're all a family. You don't have to shoulder everything alone." Marquis Morpheus hesitated for a moment, and finally sighed and said, "Okay Alves, I can't hide anything from you. I'm actually thinking about my ancestors." "What happened to our ancestors?" Alves poured him a glass of wine, his smile still on his face. "My ancestor doesn't want to leave seclusion. Who can force him?" "Aren't the ancestors of the other 2 dukes coming too?" The 7 major clans have been planning this war for a long time. One of the most important things is to ask the ancestors to come out of seclusion. Even so, only the 4 ancestors of the dukes were willing to climb out of the coffin, and the other 3 said, "No time." Among them are the ancestors of the Cape clan. "It's not a matter of coming or not." Morpheus seemed to remember something, and his face became extremely ugly. "Why?" Alves continued to ask persistently. Morpheus's expression suddenly turned cold, and he glanced at his brother with a sinister look. "You shouldn't know this. Stop asking, go and do your business." Alves' expression froze, but the next moment, he showed a warm and polite smile, bowed and said, "I obey, brother." "No, my lord." After saying that, he retreated. However, Marquis Morpheus did not notice that after turning around, Alves had a coldness in his eyes. "Cape Tian clan, Bristol City, Marquis Castle, in the room on the second floor of the library. "Princess, this is the servants' room." Fang Qingyan frowned and looked helplessly at Elizabeth, who was fumbling around in her room in front of her. "What happened to the servants' room? I didn't treat you as a servant." That with her little hands behind her back and an excited expression on her little face, Elizabeth jumped up and down to visit Fang Qingyan's room. This was the first time she entered Fang Qingyan's house. By stalking her, she insisted on asking Fang Qingyan to bring her here. Alas, there is always a distinction between superiority and inferiority. You are the princess and I am the servant. You are not suitable to stay here. Fang Qingyan sighed in his heart and said to her calmly, "Let's go out." Elizabeth pouted in dissatisfaction, rolled her eyes, and suddenly said, "Hey," pointing to an ordinary and inferior coffin beside her in shock, "how can you sleep in such a low-grade coffin? You don't tell me. If I had known that your living conditions were so poor, I would have given you a high-end coffin." Fang Qingyan's mouth twitched. "Could you please change the subject? If you stay in my room and won't leave, how can I practice?" But the mention of the coffin did make him feel a little bad. When he broke through the realm 3 years ago, he accidentally broke the coffin. He went to many places but could not buy a satisfactory coffin, so I just made an ordinary one. The comfort level is greatly reduced. But having said that, a coffin that would satisfy even the 6-winged marquis is a priceless treasure. How could it be possible to buy it? "No, I can't let you sleep in such a low-quality coffin." That there was a look of hesitation in Elizabeth's beautiful eyes, but she soon made up her mind. She put her little hands on her hips and said boldly, "Follow me, and I, the princess, will take you to get the best coffin." "It's not necessary, it's really unnecessary." Fang Qingyan waved his hands repeatedly. Elizabeth stared at her beauty and said very forcefully, "A good coffin is the face of the vampire clan. As a friend, your face is the face of this princess. Let's go." After saying that, he grabbed Fang Qingyan's arm with his little hand and dragged it out. Fang Qingyan looked helpless. Okay, I'll go with you, don't push around." He really has nothing to do with this princess. I can only let her go, but here comes the question, where will Elizabeth take him to get the coffin ready? He really doesn't like ordinary coffins. P.S. Xiao rushes to the street asking for flowers. Asking for a monthly ticket. Asking for rating votes. Beg on your knees. Chapter 49. The Marquis Castle is huge, as big as a dozen Castain castles. There are groups of buildings, some tall and some short, some majestic and some small and delicate, arranged in rows and rows. This is the residence of the head of the royal clan. It is called a castle, but it is actually a huge palace. Deep inside the castle, in a lush garden, Elizabeth's little head crept out of the bushes, and she looked around with vigilant eyes like a thief. No one, safe. Hurry, catch up." She jumped out of the bushes, turned around and urged. Fang Qingyan's face was expressionless, but he actually felt the urge to collapse in his heart. He, a majestic 6-winged marquis, actually followed this inconspicuous princess, sneaking into the woods, climbing over walls, and climbing into holes. It was simply degrading to his elegance, and even more humiliating to his identity. "I said, Elizabeth, isn't this your own home? Why are you sneaking around?" he asked somewhat speechlessly. "Shoo!" She quickly raised 2 slender fingers in front of her red lips and lowered her voice and said, "The place we are going to is a family forbidden area. In the entire Cape clan, only my father is qualified to enter and exit. The rest will be punished if they trespass. Very miserable. Forbidden area, then you still bring me here." The corners of Fang Qingyan's mouth twitched. If it was discovered, it might not be as simple as being repaired, right? "It's okay, my father went out to fight, and there should be no one guarding the forbidden area. If we are careful, we won't be discovered." Elizabeth confidently puffed up her chest and vowed, "As for our ancestor, he hasn't been out for tens of thousands of years. If it is closed, even if he finds us, he will not pay attention." "What? Is there an ancestor of the Duke still living in the forbidden area?" Fang Qingyan's eyes widened and he looked at her incredulously. He dared to trespass into the Duke's retreat place. He was just lighting up the toilet, looking for shit, death. No, he can't be led into the sewer by Elizabeth. At that moment, Fang Qingyan let go of his mental power, and the terrifying mental power of the six-winged Marquis instantly enveloped the entire Marquis Morpheus castle. Sure enough, something strange was discovered. There is a secret room tens of meters underground in front of you. In the secret room at this moment, there is an old man lying in a coffin meditating and practicing. He exudes the aura of the winged Marquis. There are rumors from the outside world that Marquis Morpheus took away all the Marquis elites from the family when he set out, but now it seems that he still has a hand. The two-winged Marquis was left to protect the castle and guard the entrance to the forbidden area. Quick, quick, let's rush into the underground palace while there's no one around. Elizabeth is high-spirited and her aqua-blue eyes are full of agility. Fang Qingyan was speechless, taking advantage of no one. Can't you see the big lump of Marquis underneath? Well, you really can't see it. Elizabeth is just a weak viscount. Alas! Helpless, Fang Qingyan could only keep up. When he arrived at the entrance to the underground palace, the fingers in his sleeves moved slightly. In the underground secret room, the old man in the coffin opened and closed his eyes, with a puzzled expression on his face. Chapter 37. You are listening at novelfull.audio. He just felt that the space around him seemed to tremble faintly for a moment, but it seemed to be his illusion. Out of cautious habit, the old man still released his mental power and carefully scanned every corner of the castle to make sure that he did not sense any abnormalities. He then lay down with peace of mind and continued to meditate and practice. In fact, Fang Qingyan had used his superpowers to completely block the space around the underground secret room. All the images perceived by the double-winged Marquis's mental power were just illusions presented to him by Fang Qingyan. Hurry, 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 we're here, it's in front. Elizabeth rushed in happily. Fang Qingyan was calm and followed her slowly. The two went straight into the underground along a secret passage. Every 50 meters, there would be an oil lamp on the stone wall of the corridor, so that the light was sometimes dim and sometimes bright. This secret passage was very long, and it kept going deeper and deeper diagonally downward. A few minutes later, they finally reached the end of the secret passage. When they walked out of the exit, their vision suddenly opened up. Thousands of candles flickered, illuminating the huge underground palace. Elizabeth seemed to have sneaked into a forbidden area before, so she brought Fang Qingyan to a secret room with ease and skillfully opened the mechanism that sealed the secret room. Click. The 2-meter-high stone door opened. Dang 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 dang. Elizabeth proudly pinched her waist with one hand and pointed inside with one hand. You can take any coffin in here. Fang Qingyan looked up and couldn't help but be a little surprised. The huge secret room was filled with coffins one after another, and each coffin exuded the fragrance that only top-grade materials could have. He walked up and casually checked a few of the coffins, and was immediately shocked. Damn it! He said why he couldn't buy a good coffin in every city. It turns out that the real top-grade coffins are monopolized by you evil royal families. There are about 200 coffins in the secret room. Any coffin you pick is many times more advanced than his previous love coffin worth 8,000 gold coins. Fang Qingyan's mouth twitched. The rich are feasting and drinking, while the poor are freezing on the streets. He finally experienced the meaning of this poem. What is priceless to ordinary nobles can be piled up in a whole warehouse by the royal clan, piled here to gather dust. Take any coffin you like. Elizabeth urged. We'll leave quickly after we take it. Not far away is the secret room where the ancestor is in seclusion. Let's come quietly and leave quietly. Fang Qingyan was not polite when he heard this. He directly carried a top-level coffin and walked out. However, when he passed the secret room where the ancestor was in seclusion, he paused slightly, and a strange look appeared in his eyes. He keenly felt that something seemed to be wrong. P.S. Please support Chapter 50. In the forbidden area of the underground palace, in front of the secret room. Fang Qingyan hesitated for a moment and wanted to release his mental power to explore the situation inside, but he immediately gave up the idea. Using mental power to detect others is a very provocative behavior and it is easy to make enemies. Although he was confident that with his current strength, even if the Duke came, he could escape unscathed and run away easily. But considering that Elizabeth was still by his side and it was easy to affect her, he gave up. He carried the coffin back to the library. Elizabeth chatted with him for a while before saying goodbye and leaving. Fang Qingyan stood alone in the room for a few minutes, wandered a few steps, and made a decision. Long before passing the secret room, he had a premonition that something was wrong. He had a very strong premonition. It was related to the peaceful life in the future, so Fang Qingyan decided to figure things out. After taking a deep breath, his eyes suddenly opened and closed, and a light shone in his dark and deep eyes. Buzz, the surrounding space suddenly twisted and folded, just like a calm water surface, rippling with waves, and the environment on all sides also came alive, starting to wriggle, change, and replace. 0.5 seconds later, everything calmed down. Fang Qingyan didn't move. But he was no longer in the room at the moment. He raised his head and looked forward solemnly. The huge stone door was sealed and unbreakable. The Duke of the Capet clan was in seclusion inside. If everything was Fang Qingyan's overthinking, then he would definitely offend a duke if he broke in, but he didn't hesitate. Buzz, the space folded again. Fang Qingyan disappeared from the spot and teleported into the secret room. As soon as he came in, a foul smell of decay hit his nose, making people sick. Fang Qingyan looked up and couldn't help but change his face slightly, and took a breath of cold air with a hiss. Not far ahead, a half-rotten corpse was half-kneeling on the ground, with tattered clothes, a drooping head, a withered body, and hands hanging limply. However, what really shocked Fang Qingyan was that behind the rotten corpse, there were huge wings. Each wing was more than 20 meters long. It can be imagined that when 10 such wings were spread out at the same time, they would definitely cover the sky and the sun. However, they had already lost their vitality at this moment, and the flesh on their wings had long been separated, leaving only some rotten flesh hanging on the white skeleton, drooping like weeds. No matter how glorious they were in the past, now only the ugly appearance after rotting was left, full of sadness and desolation. 1, 2, 3, 4, 10. 10 holy wings. Fang Qingyan's expression was extremely complicated. Sure enough, no wonder you haven't come out for tens of thousands of years. It turns out that you have already fallen. The scene in front of him confirmed his guess. The peak of the marquee is 6 wings. The blood clan corpse in front of him with 10 holy wings must have been a duke in his lifetime. His previous premonition was right. The Duke ancestor of the Capet clan really had an accident. Fang Qingyan stared at the bones in front of him and did not speak for a long time. He was thinking about many things in his heart. For example, what about the cause of death? It is impossible that he died of old age due to exhaustion of lifespan, because the Duke ancestors of the 7 major clans were all figures of the same era, and the dukes of other families were still alive and kicking. It is also impossible that he was killed by the enemy. How terrifying is the strength of the Duke! He can move mountains and fill the sea with a wave of his hand, and destroy the world. It is impossible for him to die quietly. Then there is only one possibility. Fang Qingyan's eyes were solemn, failed to advance to the prince, and died of backlash. The price of failing to advance to the marquee is that he will never be able to break through his own realm again in his lifetime. However, if the Duke fails to advance, he will have to pay the price of his life. The scene in front of him sounded the alarm for Fang Qingyan. In the future, if you are not sure of breaking through, you must not take risks. The reason why the 7 major clans are royal families is that they all rely on the Duke ancestors of the family. This is the strongest backer and the biggest trump card. But now, the backer of the Capet clan has fallen, and judging from the degree of decay of the corpse, it has been dead for at least more than 1,000 years. If the outside world gets to know this news, the Capet clan will be in annihilation. Only a duke can train a marquis. Similarly, only a prince can train a duke. The 7 dukes of the royal family were all born in an era when princes still existed, but now, there are no princes in the world. I don't mean to disturb you. If I offend you, I hope you don't mind. Rest in peace. Fang Qingyan shook his head and sighed in his heart. He raised his hand gently, and a piece of the ground suddenly disappeared, as if it was eaten by an invisible monster, and a big pit appeared out of thin air. Then the corpse flew up and fell into it. With another wave of his hand, the ground returned to its original state without any change. After burying this pitiful duke, Fang Qingyan was about to use his space ability to return to his room, but the next moment, he paused. That he looked at the stone wall on the side, which seemed to have some words written on it. Fang Qingyan walked over and looked up. those were 2 paragraphs of text carved on the stone wall, with iron strokes and silver hooks, quite imposing. My name is William Capet. I was born as an earl, became a marquis at the age of 100, became a 6-winged at the age of 1000, and was appreciated by the prince at the age of 3000. He gave me 10 drops of blood essence, allowing me to enter the realm of Duke. Before I died, I had already reached the peak of the 10-wing realm. I claim to be a genius among the heavens, blessed by nature, and it is not difficult for me to think about the 12-winged blood ancestor. This paragraph is still normal, but the second paragraph that follows, the style suddenly changes, the contrast is huge, and the words reveal a strong unwillingness, anger, madness, and hysteria. I hate it. I hate it. Hate it. Hate it. Why is fate so unfair to me? I have been in seclusion for 190,000 years, and have been searching for the realm of the blood ancestor for my whole life, trying to reach the realm of the prince, but in the end it was all a dream. Only when I was dying did I figure out the secret of heaven, that only those who become dukes at the age of 100 have the opportunity to advance to the prince. 100 years. 100 years. How ridiculous. A peerless genius like me still spent 3,000 years to become a duke. I can't do it. Who else can do it if I push forward 1,000,000 years and push forward 1,000,000 years? Who else? After reading it, Fang Qingyan was silent for a full 5 minutes. Finally, he spit out 3 words with a twitch at the corner of his mouth, and me. Chapter 51. Chapter 38. You are listening at novelfull.audio. This Duke William was also a magnificent figure back then, but since the birth of the vampire clan, there have only been 9 princes. It can even be said that all vampires have more or less blood connections with the 9 princes. Vampires are a race that cannot rely on their own cultivation to break through the limitations of their bloodline, because their bloodline is locked tightly from birth. If you want to break through the Baron, you must obtain the Baron's blood essence. That if you want to break through the Viscount, you must obtain the Viscount's blood essence. That if you want to break through the Prince, of course you need the Prince's essence and blood. In a land of wealth and wealth, cultivation resources are always indispensable, including Fang Qingyan, who has grown up to this day and has lost count of how many drops of blood he has swallowed. Without blood essence, he might still be a humble last vampire. But this William Capet wanted to advance to the rank of prince by relying on his own cultivation. It is tantamount to an act that defies heaven. Therefore, Fang Qingyan somewhat admired him, even though he was also a loser. Is the prince the level where a vampire achieves its final evolution? Fang Qingyan murmured to himself, why are all the 9 princes who claim to be immortal dead? Perhaps the answer to this question can be found by going to the prince's tomb mentioned by Count Castain. Fang Qingyan was not worried that he would fall on the road to becoming a prince like Duke William. As for the last sentence on the stone wall, it revealed key information: only those who become a duke before the age of 100 can peek into the prince's domain. Then there is no need to worry. Less than 7 years have passed since Fang Qingyan obtained the system to today, but he is already a 6-winged marquis. Moreover, during the more than 3 years in the library, his qi and blood have become saturated and full. It won't take long to break through the duke. No matter what, no news of Duke William's death could spread. Otherwise, the Cape clan will be swallowed up and destroyed by other royal clans. Fang Qingyan was about to leave. Suddenly he remembered something again and stopped. System, I want to sign in here. Ding. The sign-in is successful. Congratulations to the host for getting Prince Essence and Blood X10, 8-star magic weapon, Blood Oath Guard. Fang Qingyan's eyes widened and he was a little unresponsive. I actually got 2 items after signing in this time. Moreover, 10 drops of Prince's essence and blood. This reward is too generous. He thought for a moment and then gradually understood. There is a rule in the system's check-in mechanism. The more special the place you check in, the more generous rewards you will get. There is no doubt that this secret room where the Duke's ancestors retreated is the most special place in the entire castle and even the entire Cape clan. For example, when playing a dungeon, the final boss drops. It is impossible to get such generous rewards by signing in anywhere in the Cape clan. 10 drops of the prince's essence and blood. Fang Qingyan's eyes glowed with scorching light. God is really helping me, that there is no more prince in the world, but he continued to obtain the prince's essence and blood. Fang Qingyan looked around the secret room and decided to break through the Duke here. However, he checked another reward item first, the 8-star magic weapon, Blood Oath Guardian. Only by using the Duke as the material can an 8-star level magic weapon be forged. This is an exquisite necklace. The blood-red gemstones are pendant with star-like points of light, shining and beautiful. Blood Oath Guardian is a purely defensive 8-star magic weapon. After wearing it, once it senses that the owner's life is in danger, it will release an indestructible energy and blood barrier that even the Duke of 10 Wings cannot break for a while. However, Fang Qingyan curled his lips and threw it back into his backpack, no longer interested in it. This thing was strong, but it was a bit useless to him. If his life was really in danger, he would have used his space ability to teleport away. Why put up a barrier to stand there and get beaten when you can run? Crack! That he raised his hand and snapped his fingers. A coffin next door disappeared and appeared in the secret room. After lying in, closed the coffin lid, Fang Qingyan took out a drop of the prince's essence blood containing terrifying life energy and drank it directly. Start to advance to Duke, the eastern side of the Delano Mountains. On the endless plain, there are thousands of bonfires and densely packed tents, stretching from the foothills to the end of the horizon. The orc army in Azeroth has already been assembled and is ready to fight the vampires. There are endless orcs of different shapes as far as the eye can see, werewolves, minotaurs, giants, half-human and half-snake Medusa, undead orcs covered in phosphorus fire. In short, there are all kinds of orcs. Millions of troops are waiting, and a murderous atmosphere has enveloped the sky above the Delano Mountains, which is oppressive and suffocating. The 7 major orc clans of Azeroth, Warsong, Fireblade, Blackstone, Bloodring, the entire army assembles for a desperate battle. Bang, 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 heavy footsteps sounded like thunder, and a giant tens of meters tall came forward. The ground would tremble with every step he took. Above the giant's head, a beast king stood proudly. He has a ferocious build, with bulging muscles, a green face and fangs, and holds a giant axe with cold light in both hands. Full of unparalleled courage and majesty, he is Garrosh, the chief of the Warsong clan, and also the chief of the Orc tribe, commanding 7 armies. Garrosh looked around, and suddenly raised his giant axe, saying, "For the Horde," that the fighting spirit of the millions of orcs was ignited. Everyone's blood was boiling. For the Horde. For the Horde. For the Horde, that the chief of the Beast King waved his huge arm. Let's go, that the army set out. An unprecedented war is about to begin. P.S. I feel a little uncomfortable and have a fever, so the update is a little late, but it is scheduled to be released tonight, so I can't rest, and I will update until I can't move anymore. Chapter 52. The west side of the Draenor Mountains, the same thousands of troops formed an endless square formation, stretching across the vast land. This is the kingdom of Nikera, the blood army of the 7 royal clans. In a luxurious and huge tent, 7 blood clansmen with terrifying auras sat on luxurious chairs, looking noble and elegant, with beautiful maids serving them. Marquis Morpheus was among them. The 7 people were the heads of the 7 major blood clans. Clan Brook, Clan Revno, Clan Jordain, Clan Capet, Clan Setet, Clan Gongro and Clan Torito. They are the rulers of the kingdom of Nikera, the supreme existence. The meeting had been going on for a while before, and the 7 heads of the family reached a unified strategy. The ancestors will not take action unless the Beast King of Azeroth comes out. Marquis Jordain said expressionlessly, "So everyone, just accept your fate." Marquis Revno's eyes were crazy, and he grinned, "Kill. Kill all these orcs, and the 1,000-year grudge will be settled tonight." That everyone glanced at him lightly, knowing that the head of the Revno clan was a famous lunatic. Suddenly, the ground trembled, and the stones shook. A boom, boom, boom sound came from afar, which was the noise caused by the millions of troops rushing on the land. Marquis Brook stood up and sneered, "You dare to take the initiative to attack, you don't know whether you live or die. Kill." The roar was like thunder. After crossing the Draenor Mountains, the Orc army drove straight in and launched a charge, without any tactics, just rush and it's over. The Blood Clan army was certainly not afraid at all. 24 marquises led 2.7 million blood clans and also launched a charge. Like an overwhelming tsunami, it spread from the east and west sides of the earth to the middle. The two armies soon collided with each other. For a moment, the wind and clouds changed color. Chapter 39. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The battlefield was like a meat grinder. In just a few seconds, mountains of bones and blood flowed into rivers. The great chief sat high on the giant's head, observing the battle situation with calm eyes. Time passed minute by minute. This battle lasted from night to dawn. A moment before the morning light rose, the sound of gold rang out from behind the vampire army. Retreat. Sunlight is too lethal to vampires, but it has no effect on orcs, so the vampires want to take an intermission and start a new war when night falls. Humph. The whole army is pursuing us, the chief sneered. A group of shady rats only dare to show off their evil at night. The moment the sun rises, you will be defeated. The Blood Clan's wars are always limited to one wave. If we cannot gain a decisive advantage before dawn, we have no chance and can only retreat temporarily. That's why we suffer repeated defeats. Kill. The orc army suddenly became more motivated to fight. Everyone knows that vampires are restrained by sunlight, and today's light means that only vampires can be chased and beaten by orcs. Rumble, the great chief jumped directly from the giant's head, and he was about to take action, because the decisive moment has come. For a moment, the war seemed to be coming to an end. Corpses were piled all over the land, blood formed rivers, and broken limbs floated. The vampires abandoned hundreds of thousands of corpses and fled frantically. They were chased all over the map by the orc army. The slow-running vampires were torn into pieces. Victory seems to belong to Azeroth. Bang. The 7 family heads knelt down on one knee and roared in unison with a sound like thunder. Please take action, ancestors. On the ground in front, 4 ancient black coffins were neatly placed. Suddenly, the lids of the 4 coffins were lifted simultaneously. Boom! An extremely terrifying aura rose into the sky, and its pressure swept across thousands of miles, as if it wanted to destroy the world. Humph! How dare a mere orc barbarian be so arrogant? An old and domineering voice sounded. To bully my descendants, you really don't know whether to live or die. Another eerie voice. Forget it, I haven't made a move for hundreds of thousands of years. It's time to stretch this old bone. A bunch of ants, how dare you act so recklessly? The 4 Duke ancestors suddenly flew out of the coffin. Brush, .10 blood-red holy wings 20 to 30 meters long spread out at the same time, covering the sky and the sun, casting a shadow on the earth. The 4 dukes have all reached the 10-wing level. The terrifying energy and blood power at the peak level of the dukes suddenly erupted, like a landslide and tsunami, and the surrounding space cracked with spiderweb-like cracks. Millions of vampires were nearly suffocated, including the 7 6-winged marquis. All of them were suppressed by the air and fell to the ground, their foreheads sinking into the soil, making it difficult to breathe. The ancestors of the 4 dukes, who have lived for hundreds of thousands of years, are like demons coming to the world. At this time, the sun rose. Countless vampires had expressions of fear on their faces, fearful of being annihilated by the sun. Humph. Do you really think that we vampires can't fight against the sun? Duke Brook snorted coldly, pointed to the sky, and said in a domineering voice, Yunlai. The terrifying mental power surges like a tidal wave. In an instant, the situation changes. The sky that was clear a moment ago suddenly became overcast, and thick clouds covered the entire land. A cloud covering tens of thousands of square kilometers was created out of thin air. The sky darkened instantly. Like nightfall, there is no more sunshine between heaven and earth. Duke Brook actually has the superpower to control the weather. This is like the handiwork of a god. Far away, the chief who was leading his army in pursuit suddenly changed his color and turned pale. Retreat. The entire army retreats. The Beast King roared, and the sound swept for dozens of miles. You old immortals, have you crawled out of the coffin too? Bastards! The appearance of the 4 dukes filled the chief with despair. Although the Beast King is almost on the same level as the duke, but the other party is at the peak of the duke. And there are 4. Chapter 53. The orc army began to retreat. the situation changed too quickly. One moment, they were chasing the vampire army all over the field, and the next moment, the opponent invited the ancestors out. This is actually part of the Blood Clan's tactics: lure the enemy deep, and then annihilate the orc army. Run. Humph. Where to run? Another duke sneered, and with a wave of his hand, the temperature on the battlefield dropped sharply, like the fury of winter. The ice spread like a tsunami from under your feet, 10 miles away in an instant, freezing all life in its path. The hundreds of thousands of orcs at the rear of the army were swallowed up by ice crystals in an instant, and were frozen in a layer of ice tens of meters thick. The whole world has entered an ice age. At a glance, it is covered in silver and covered with snow. Under the white snow, there is a layer of hard ice where hundreds of thousands of orcs are buried, stretching as far as the eye can see. Roar! The war chief let out an angry roar. He jumped up to a very high altitude, and then fell from the sky like a war hammer, burning with golden flames and hitting the ground hard. Boom! The terrifying shock wave swept away in a manner visible to the naked eye, wrapped in golden flames, and finally blocked the incoming cold wave. Quickly retreat. As long as we cross the Drano Mountains and enter the plains, we can escape. The veins on the chief's face were furious, and he turned around and roared. When the remaining orc army heard the warchief's words, they immediately ran like wolves and ran towards the Draenor Mountains with all their strength. Humph! No one can escape. The Duke of the Gongro family shouted loudly, his hands burst out with a dazzling bloody light, and he suddenly raised it to the sky. Get up! Rumble, rumble! Suddenly, the ground shook violently. A look of extreme horror suddenly appeared on all the orcs' faces, because the Delano Mountains towering into the sky actually alive. Like a lazy donkey rolling around, he rolled over towards the orc army. Rumble, rumble! Countless orcs were instantly crushed into pulp by the falling mountains. The ground shook and collapsed like waves, and thorns suddenly shot up into the sky, overturning the men and horses. Asshole! The great chief was furious, roaring like a wild lion, with blood and tears in his eyes. The army of millions of orcs was completely wiped out by the ancestors of the 4 dukes. And there were only 3 people who took action, and the other one didn't take action at all. The 10-winged duke is so terrifying. Kill! There was a look of determination in the chief's eyes. He turned around and rushed towards the 4 dukes, his battle axe rising with golden flames and murderous intent in the sky. The battle is lost. There is no need to struggle. He just wants to be wrapped in horse leather and die on the battlefield. The 4 dukes sneered, and the 40 holy wings shook, disappeared, and swarmed forward. 10 minutes later, with a roar full of unwillingness and sorrow, the Beast King's head was twisted off, and blood filled the sky. The vampire army cheered loudly. The war is over. Night, there are thousands of bonfires on the ground, and the vampires are celebrating their victory, and everyone's face is filled with excitement. In the tent, Marquis Morpheus and his brother Alves were also drinking and celebrating. I didn't expect these orcs to be so vulnerable and to be destroyed in one battle. Alves took a sip of wine and laughed. We will return in triumph tomorrow. You can't say that. The orcs are brave and good at fighting. If our ancestors don't come out of seclusion, it's impossible for us to defeat them. Marquis Morpheus shook his head and sighed. From now on, without external enemies, the disputes within the vampire clan will intensify again. Every country is like this. Chapter 40. You are listening at novelfull.audio. When there is a common enemy, they will temporarily unite and deal with the outside world in unison. When the foreign enemies are eliminated, it will return to the previous civil war. The 7 royal clans have never been single-minded. Even during the 1,000 years of war with Azeroth, they have been fighting openly and secretly. When Alves heard this, he smiled nonchalantly and said, as long as the 7 ancestors are still there will be no real war within the vampire clan. At most, there will be some minor frictions, so don't worry about it. These words seemed to touch Morpheus's heart. His face suddenly turned ugly. Before the 9-character army went eastward, he, like other family heads, went to ask his ancestors to leave seclusion, but there was no response. For thousands of years, Marquis Morpheus has visited the forbidden areas of the underground palace every 1,000 years to ask his ancestors for a drop of blood essence. This is the treatment he enjoys as the head of the family. it is impossible for the ancestor to say that he ignored him completely, but this time, he really ignored it. Marquis Morpheus is very worried. If something unexpected happens to his ancestor, the Cape clan will face annihilation. Moreover, if there are no intact eggs in the overturned nest, Elizabeth will also be brutally killed. So Marquis Morpheus can't wait to go back and confirm the situation of his ancestors again. If there is still no response, then you can only risk the crime of disrespect and force the stone door open. His face was uncertain, just thinking about it. Suddenly footsteps came from outside. Reporting to the head of the family, the head of the Riefno family invites you and the Marquis of Alves to come over and attend the celebration banquet. P.S. Please support me. Chapter 54. Celebration Party. Marquis Morpheus was stunned for a moment, but he didn't think much about it. He said yeah and nodded. I know, let's change clothes and go. Soon, he and Alves came to the camp of the Riefno clan wearing brand new and gorgeous attire. Unexpectedly, His Highness of the Riefno clan came out to greet him in person. "Two adults, we have been waiting for you for a long time. Please come with me." Alger Ravno had a polite and humble smile on his face and made a polite gesture of invitation. "Is everyone else here?" Marquis Morpheus was a little surprised. He was afraid that people would wait too long, so he quickly walked in with Alves. He didn't notice that there was a mocking look in Alger's eyes behind him. "I'm sorry to keep you waiting." As Marquis Morpheus spoke, he opened the tent. However, after seeing the scene clearly, his body suddenly stiffened, his pupils shrank violently, and he stood at the door with both feet without taking another step forward. In the tent, there was only Angus, Marquis of Ravno, and an ancient black coffin. Alves seemed to have thought of something, and his face became horrified. "Sorry, we went to the wrong place." Marquis Morpheus was silent for 2 seconds, then turned around quickly and was about to leave quickly. However, a person appeared in front of him and blocked his way. "Hey, you two adults, the rules of the celebration banquet are that you will not return until you are drunk." Alger Ravno had a half-smile expression on his face, and said in a joking voice, "Why bother leaving in a hurry?" Marquis Morpheus was furious. "Celebration party. This is clearly the hangmen banquet. How dare Amir Jr. dare to stop me?" Marquis Morpheus's eyes widened angrily and he shouted loudly. Alves bared 2 fangs from his mouth, and his eyes showed irritability and bloodlust. The atmosphere is tense. The 2 6-winged Marquis could kill Alger, the 0-winged Marquis, with just one sneeze. Snort. Suddenly, a cold snort sounded from the coffin. The terrifying pressure came like an overwhelming force. Morpheus and Alves' expressions suddenly changed, and they were forced to kneel on the ground by this momentum. How dare 2 juniors dare to act wild? The voice of Duke Adolphe, the ancestor of the Ravno clan, sounded in the coffin, domineering and cold. "Come in." Morpheus's face showed frustration, "But there is no way. If you really dare to disobey, you will definitely be killed." He never expected that just after defeating the orcs together, and before the celebration party even started, the Riefno clan would start to turn against each other and play dirty tricks. The terrifying pressure of the Duke disappeared. The 2 brothers did not dare to run, so they could only return to the tent with an uneasy mood. "Ha ha 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 ha." Marquis Angus laughed maniacally and said, "Morpheus, Alves, you didn't expect this day, right? When you kill my son Jason, you should be prepared to pay with your life. Shall we kill your son?" Morpheus was stunned for a moment, and then cursed angrily. "There is no need to excuse yourself if you want to accuse me." Alves also shouted, "You don't want to slander anyone. Who will kill your son? We brothers will not bear the blame." "Humph." Alger said with a gloomy expression and a gloomy voice, "You don't have to make excuses. One of you two is the murderer of my brother and must be punished with his life." Marquis Morpheus was extremely angry, and just as he was about to retaliate, he heard Alves ask, "Did you really kill Jason Riefno?" "Fart." Marquis Morpheus's face flushed red, and he turned around and cursed, "You idiot, don't you understand the situation? The orcs have been defeated, and it's time for the vampires to eliminate dissidents. Even if they know that the murderer is not us, they will attack us." Alves was speechless. After scolding this mentally retarded brother, Morpheus turned his head to look at the ancient coffin and shouted, Lord Duke Adolf, do you really want to bully the weak? If my brothers die here, Ancestor William will be furious. Do you really want to start a holy war? Holy war. A war between the 7 royal clans, and a war in which the Duke participated. There were only 7 of the original 9 royal clans, and the 2 destroyed clans were destroyed in the Holy War. Once the Holy War begins, it will be a fight to the death. Either you destroy me or I destroy you. However, Duke Adolf ignored him. He. The Marquis of Angus laughed a creepy laugh, his expression was ferocious, his eyes were fierce and brutal. Stop talking nonsense. One of you 2 brothers must be buried with my son Jason today. Who lives and who dies, you decide for yourselves. That they actually wanted to force them to kill each other, how cruel. Morpheus was immediately furious, his fat body trembled with anger, and shouted, I am the head of the Capet clan. Even if I die here today, I will not be humiliated by you, but you remember, Ancestor William will definitely seek justice for us brothers. Alvis, fight hard, let's escape together. Okay Morpheus, we brothers fight side by side, and we must die together. Alvis, see you in the next life, kill. Morpheus' eyes were red, and he was about to spread his 6 wings to fight to the death. Puff, suddenly, a bloody hand pierced his chest from behind, and the red flame of blood and chi on the arm was wrapped around it, evaporating the blood with a sizzle. Marquis Morpheus's expression froze, and he turned back in disbelief, looking at his brother who had been with him day and night for tens of thousands of years. Alvis! He roared furiously, punched Alvis' head with his right hand, and held the arm that pierced his chest with his left hand and tore it hard. Boom! Alvis's head was shattered, and his arm was torn off at the shoulder, and blood gushed out. The next moment, the headless and one-armed Alvis retreated a distance, and the power of blood and chi bloomed, and a head and arm grew in an instant. Why? Are you also a coward? Morpheus was extremely furious, and the hole in his chest healed in 0.1 second, but his heart was cold. His brother actually killed him to survive. Why? He glared at Alvis again and asked loudly. Morpheus. Alvis's expression was twisted and ferocious, his eyes were filled with endless hatred and resentment, and his fangs rubbed fiercely. I am your brother. But why are you the head of the family? I will never forget how desperate I was the day you became the head of the family. You only stepped into the 6 wings 1,000 years earlier than me, and your talent is only a little bit better than mine. Why are you the head of the family? You have kept these words in your heart for a long time, right? Every time you respectfully call me the head of the family, you should wish I would die, right? Morpheus's expression suddenly calmed down, so calm that it was terrifying, and his voice was cold and emotionless. Well, today I will tell you why I can be the head of the family, but you can't. He clenched his fist, and the terrifying power of chi and blood suddenly erupted. The ground within a radius of 10 kilometers collapsed half a meter, and the tent had been torn to pieces. Chapter 55.120,000 words, it's on the shelves. The time is 10 o'clock tonight, but there are only 10,000 V received. Readers who understand know that it's actually quite unsuccessful. My V received in more than 10 days is not as good as the V received by the big guys in 1 day. The author used to write fan fiction, and this is the first time to write an original novel. The biggest difference between fan fiction and original fiction is that you have to set everything yourself, especially the characters, which are directly used from fan fiction. The personality, strength, and everything are set, including the growth of the characters, and the plot. Every plot is racking my brains to think about, which is very tiring. I really worked hard to write this book, although I know that I don't write well. I will try my best. I read the book review area every day. There are some problems that the author cannot find. Only the reader's perspective can see the problem. Finally, really, please everyone. For the sake of Xia Puji who insists on coding even with a fever, please subscribe.